This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome to The Weekly. I'm Justin Warmoth. Hope you're having a great Sunday. This morning we're joined by Dr. Jim Clark.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. UCF history professor, News 6 political analyst. And anything happen over the last 60 days that we need to discuss?
Boy, this has really reshaped Florida, hasn't it? In so many ways. First of all, the legislature looks like it's going to adjourn on time. I cannot remember the last time that's happened. Can you?
I know, but you would know better than me. I'm curious how you see this session compared to the others.
First of all, from the get-go, it was clear what was going to pass. We knew 2 months ago that the legislature was only there to pass the governor's agenda. In past years, we have seen the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House emerge with real power. This year, they've been there to rubber stamp the governor, and so there's been very little debate. The Republicans have a supermajority, so the Democrats have been tilting at windmills. They were able to pass, to stop one piece of legislation. The Republicans had introduced a bill to outlaw the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And that's going to fail.
There are quite a few bills like that. I think there are quite a few bills of that nature every session, right?
Yeah.
We get those that we know that they're not going to pass,
Right.
but people do them for their base and to rile up folks and things like that. But so overall, would you call this session a win for Governor DeSantis?
You know, it's really hard to say when. The whole setup was that he would pass his agenda, and for 60 days he would be the focus of the entire nation. And certainly he's gotten more publicity than the other 49 governors combined, and yet almost every week he falls in the polls. When this opened, he was at 29%. Former President Trump was at 44%. Today he's at 22%, and former President Trump is over 50. So this has not quite turned out, I think, the way he thought it would.
And it's interesting, too, because I think some critics have argued that this session could backfire on DeSantis when he does, in fact, launch his presidential campaign and starts campaigning around the entire United States as opposed to just the state of Florida.
Yeah, he has made some things that have not particularly turned out well recently. His trip to Japan, the quote, the video of him responding to whether he's a candidate and laughing has gone viral. The comments of the British leaders about his appearance there has stirred a lot of controversy. So his foreign trip was not the success he thought it was going to be. It
was interesting that he took that trip in the middle of legislative session as well, right? I don't know this. Are governors normally in Tallahassee for the entire 60-day session?
Yeah, usually they're there. But again, I think this 2-month period where the legislature was meeting was all part of a package to enhance him.
Yes. And there are so many things that were passed and have already been signed, in fact, into law during this legislative session that if we try to go down that path of going through every single line of new legislation coming through the state of Florida, it's going to take up way too long. But is there anything significant that you feel like was passed that you believe we need to touch on this morning? And perhaps on the flip side of that, something that you're surprised did not get passed?
Yeah, on the did not get passed list, it's very short, was the bill to allow it to be easier to sue the media.
Right.
Senator Broder of Seminole County had introduced, first of all, a bill to make bloggers say where they were getting their money from. And second of all, to make it easier to sue media for libel or slander. In this case, it was the conservatives who rose up. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich was the first to criticize the blogger part of it because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of conservative bloggers out there who don't want to say where they're getting their money from. Then on the other side, to make it easier to sue, it was the conservative media that rose up. The head of Salem Broadcasting, which owns conservative radio stations, said it would put us out of business. People could just file suits. And as we saw in the Fox suit recently, conservative media gets sued also. Yeah,
it's not a one-sided thing here. And when it comes to the governor's budget, another record budget, 117 billion. That's 5 billion more than last year. The largest policy area in that budget is education.
Yes.
What in that education budget sticks out to you?
I think it's a strange dichotomy.
Yeah.
First of all, he is increasing funding for state universities by huge amounts. He is pouring money into the infrastructure of Florida schools, which is fantastic. On the other side, he's getting more and more involved in the classroom, the kind of instruction, the kind of things that are going to be taught. So on the one hand, I think schools are jumping for joy at some of these things. And on the other hand, I think they're very concerned about what it means for education.
And one other thing that was passed, and I think this is what the governor was waiting for, a little bit of an assist from the Florida lawmakers, was to allow him to run for higher office while also serving as governor. Now, this was reversed in like 2018, I believe, or 2016, and it was only a 6-year stint of having this on the books, if that. But that's another thing that they passed. That, listen, they got the order that you got to do this, and I'm curious how everything shapes up, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But the supermajority factor in this, did that have a big influence in the governor getting the majority of his things passed?
Yeah, they didn't even have to listen to the Democrats.
Democrats had zero power.
Yeah, had to consult with them. All the Democrats could do was kind of throw rocks and hope that somebody noticed. And frankly, they had zero impact. As we've talked about before, the Democratic Party in Florida is in disarray. It's amazing when you think that 5 years ago, they came within 30,000 votes of winning the governorship and holding a Senate seat in the U.S. Senate. And today, they couldn't win anything.
And something else that really took a lot of the headlines during session was the governor's ongoing feud with Disney. Lawsuits aplenty. And we're going to have more insight from Dr. Jim Clark on the latest when it comes to Disney versus the governor, plus how the 2024 presidential race is starting to heat up. We'll have that and much more coming up right after this. We hope you stay with us.
This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome back to The Weekly. I'm Justin Warmoth, joined by Dr. Jim Clark, News 6 political analyst, UCF history professor. Always great to see you, sir. We're continuing our conversations this morning. We're going to touch on two topics. One being the 2024 presidential run and how the GOP primary is starting to shape up. We're going to have that in just a second. But I do want to start with the governor's ongoing feud with Disney and what you make of how the last few weeks have shaped up when it comes to the lawsuits being filed from both parties here.
Yeah, I think that the governor thought a year ago he had won and the war was over. And he was doing a victory lap. A whole chapter of his book is about how he beat Disney. And now it looks like he is going to be fighting Disney until he is out of office in 3 years. So this war is going to continue both in state courts and federal courts. And it's going to continue while he is running for president. And I'm not sure he wanted that, to have stories about Disney. When he was in Japan, meeting with the prime minister of Japan, he was asked about Disney. So I think that's going to follow him for the next year.
I think he was hoping that it would follow him, but in a better sense. Now it's not in such a good light, or at least the light that he thought it was going to have on him, right? And it's interesting that Disney's lawsuit against the governor picks out chapters of his book on Disney and excerpts from the book which help their case, because it's a First Amendment suit here, talking about freedom of speech and the retaliation that Disney felt that it had for coming out against the Don't Say Gay law, the parental rights and education law. They're feeling like that's where their lawsuit, that's what it focuses on.
Yeah, and there is precedent in the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court has ruled in a case where a politician did not like something a company said, retaliated against them, and the Supreme Court ruled by 7-2 that was unconstitutional. So there is some precedent backing Disney here. As you point out, what's unusual is that the new Disney board, the DeSantis board, is going to state court. So we're going to have competing courts going on here. And I think they think the state courts, where Governor DeSantis, for example, holds power over the Supreme Court, is going to be much friendlier to them.
So in the short term, until these all get resolved, I mean, what should we know about this? I mean, is it going to continue with this every time they meet, this new appointed board, that this is just going to be the topic of conversation? Like, what else could they talk about or discuss or decide on until these all get resolved?
Well, that's going to be an interesting thing. For example, the DeSantis board voted to approve a contract with the firefighters, which Disney has to pay for. Well, is that going to stand up? Is Disney going to fight giving money to this board? And the irony here is, who's going to pay the lawyers? Is Disney going to end up paying the lawyers on both sides, either through the DeSantis board or through its own costs?
Well, the state and that board now has oversight over monorail inspections.
They do. They got.
So is that a win? I mean, can they call that a win?
I don't know.
Yeah.
There is a monorail in Miami,
Yeah.
but I don't even know if the state has monorail inspectors.
Right.
So the question is, are they going to have to create a Department of Monorail Inspectors just for Disney and hire people to inspect the monorail?
I think a pressing question, and I think certainly critics of the governor point this out, saying that this whole fiasco, whatever you want to call it, that DeSantis will ultimately regret it. Do you feel that way?
We won't know until the votes are counted.
Yeah.
I think the other Republicans, including former President Trump, have jumped on him. Nikki Haley, all these people have jumped on him over the Disney thing, but that's probably more politics than anything else. Maybe doesn't reflect their true feelings, but I do not believe he thought this was going to dominate the conversation. There's another story, front page story in the Washington Post this week about Bob Iger, the president of Disney, and Governor DeSantis and their epic struggle. This is an amazing thing. If you pick up the Wall Street Journal, if you pick up the New York Times, this is a huge ongoing story.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's certainly a talking point as more candidates, including President Biden, officially running for re-election, but you have former President Trump obviously already in the race, a number of other Republicans. The one person we're missing is DeSantis to officially announce. And, it's interesting that Trump's been picking up a lot. And listen, they can't endorse someone who hasn't filed, and maybe that's it. But the majority of Florida's congressional delegation has sided with former President Trump, and DeSantis has met with them, according to reports, and they're still endorsing Trump. What does that tell you about the way that this race is already shaping up, even though we don't have an official announcement?
The race is kind of flip-flopped in a sense. 6.5 years ago, when President Trump ran, he got almost no endorsements. In fact, people like Senator Lindsey Graham were saying this would be the end of the Republican Party. And this time, Trump is running a much more conventional campaign, going after endorsements. And it has shown up in how people view the governor. As you know, the governor was responsible for a very ambitious redistricting map that created new jobs for Republican congressmen and women, and yet some of those people have endorsed Trump. They owe their jobs to DeSantis, but are still endorsing Trump.
Now, here's something that there are rumblings that DeSantis could hit Trump on this topic, and we're not talking about, the charges and things like that, the indictments and all that. We're not talking about that. They feel like they could hammer Trump on not being able to run for re-election, say he is elected in 2024, that he will not be able to run for re-election because it's not consecutively 8 years, it's 8 years total. And so they feel like they could perhaps sway some people in Trump's camp saying, hey, wouldn't you want someone who can be there in that position for 8 consecutive years so we can really lay the groundwork down? Because we know how much incumbents have an advantage in their re-election cycles. And I'm just curious if that is something in this world of culture wars, if that even will resonate with a party like that.
The problem is the Trump people have the perfect solution for that, which is for Governor DeSantis to wait 4 years, run in 2028 after Trump has to step down after his 8 years total are over.
Why wouldn't he do that?
It's awfully hard to maintain this kind of momentum. First of all, he'll be out of office in 2028. It'll be tougher for him to, he'll be a former governor. It'll be tougher for him to get publicity. He won't have any power over the legislature. It'll be more difficult to, go around the country. Right now, he has aides and protection, state protection, and things like that. And so it makes it a lot more difficult. And there are scores of candidates who have waited. Oh, this isn't my year, I'll wait. And they were never heard from again.
I'm curious too, Jim, if there's any significance with former President Trump running. Have we seen this before after getting ousted and running again?
Just once. Grover Cleveland successfully came back. After he was defeated, he ran again against his original opponent and won. So he is the only one to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. We have had parties nominate people more than once. William Jennings Bryan lost 3 times. Adlai Stevenson lost twice. Richard Nixon lost in 1960, but then won in 1968. So there are some comeback stories here.
We want to thank Dr. Jim Clark for his time and insight as always. And you can find more information on the topics we discussed this morning by going to clickorlando.com/weekly. I'm Justin Warmoth. Hope you have a great Sunday.